I hope that the committee will join me in seeing through the continuing shady efforts of the government to bury this issue by stealth.
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. We're back with part 2 of the Auditor General's report to the Standing Committee for Government Operations.
Let's get to it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Madam Auditor General, notwithstanding the glaring mismanagement that you have pointed out and the gross waste of taxpayers' money, I think we continue to be deeply concerned with what we believe may be corruption within the department when it comes to the awarding of contracts. In the course of our study of ArriveCan, and I'll perhaps follow up on what my colleague Mr. Bacharach was talking about or questioning you about, we have had extensive issues with scrutinizing subcontractors. We know that we do not have the ability to scrutinize them in the same way that we do contractors. We have also learned from departments that the scrutiny of these subcontractors is far less strenuous than that of contractors. And in paragraph 1.53 of your report, and I'm going to quote what you mention. You mentioned in point 153, we also found a situation where the agency reached out to a firm, one that did not have a contract with the agency, to complete work on ArriveCan. A few days later, the firm's resources were added to a task authorization under a contract with GC Strategies. This is concerning. It would seem like a ploy to allow GC Strategies to get a cut for the work done by this new resource by putting them on a task authorization underneath GC Strategies and reduce oversight. Can you tell us what is the name of the firm you referenced in this paragraph?
I'm going to have to look for someone else for that answer. Hold on.
I'll have to look in the file.
We'll have to look in our audit file, and we can get back to the committee on that.
Okay, I would also ask if you could provide us with the information that whether or not this company becoming a subcontractor for GC Strategies, we received value for money of their work. And again, would it have been cheaper for CBSA to contract that firm directly rather than making them a subcontractor to GC Strategies?
I know the answer to that.
I'm going to go with yes.
The answer is yes. So Kelly Bloc is asking some really, really spot-on questions here, as she did in part 1. So the main concern here in what she's talking about is when the government is contracting to a firm like GC Strategies, it feels gross just calling them a firm. It's two dudes in a basement. And then they subcontract out to somebody else. The government has no visibility to that whatsoever. And PSPC's approach to this and their stance on this is, oh, well, that's up to them. And Sousa and the Liberals will say, well, that happens all the time. Well, yeah, it can, quote unquote, happen all the time. But in every other organization that I've been a part of, what happens is the primary contractor will bring that subcontractor in to meet the client and say, this is who they are. This is what they do. Do you approve? And the organization will either say yes or no. In this case, the government doesn't approve anything. GC Strategies would just go out and subcontract whoever the heck they want. Now, the issue that Kelly is talking about here is that CBSA found some other actual firm to actually do work, and instead of contracting them directly, they put them under the umbrella of GC Strategies so that GC Strategies would then get another cut of that rather than, avoid that extra 30% cut on the contract and deal directly with the firm. So again, there's like sketchiness on sketchiness that is happening with this whole thing.
I mean, as we noted in that paragraph that you started quoting, the last few sentences do state that it was unclear why there wasn't a contract entered into directly by the Canada Border Services Agency, and as a result, it's likely that the CBSA paid more for those resources than they should have if they had contracted directly with the vendor.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, thank you. I'm just going to go back to your mandate as the Auditor General. I had the privilege of working with you on public accounts in the role as chair of that committee, and understand that I believe your role is to take a look at the processes, rules, policies that a department puts in place to conduct their work, and that you audit those processes, policies, and rules. I guess what I'm asking you to comment in is I think we really do need to delineate the difference between the responsibility to know, which would be the minister's responsibility to know, and the responsibility to act, which would be the deputy head's responsibility to act, or those that fall within the organization underneath them. Do you believe that ministers ought to have known what was happening in their departments during the pandemic? Perhaps they weren't responsible for what happened, but did they have a responsibility to know?
In my view, that's a matter that a minister and a deputy minister should be having a conversation about and agree on what matters briefings should occur. I think every department and every minister might have a different view or different expectation, and that should be outlined and clear between the deputy head and the minister.
Thank you very much.
So, interesting question at the end. Kelly Bloc was looking to the Auditor General to try and clarify what is the role of the minister as it relates to the conduct in terms of what is going on within their departments, especially during the pandemic. But here's the thing. There would be an expectation that if a project, never mind one as highly visible and as wide-reaching as ArriveCan, was going to be going 750 times over budget, you'd think that would probably be something that you may want to chat with the minister about to let them know.
One would think.
And you would think that the minister would be really paying attention to this project because, again, very wide-reaching, right? Especially with all of the political noise that was going on across Canada about the vaccines to begin with. So I don't buy for a second that the minister didn't know what was going on. And if they did, then it's pure incompetence.
Madam Auditor General, in Section 1.67, you state that the CBSA approved timesheets with no work details, which means it's highly contractors were being paid for completing no work. Who were the contractors that submitted these blank timesheets?
So that paragraph doesn't speak about blank timesheets. What was missing on the timesheets was the project that it might relate to, or the work that was accomplished. There would have been an individual's name and the hours worked, but what was missing often was the details to allow you to know which IT project it went to, which contract or task authorization it related to, and that's just not good financial record keeping. It's not good controls or practices to validate that the government's receive what it's paying for what it actually received.
Yeah, but come on, Karen. If you receive a timesheet that has someone's name, but there's no statement of what work they did and no project on there, and there's just hours to be paid, I would argue that that's being paid for no work.
Yeah, because isn't that the whole point of a timesheet? It's for the employer or the person doing the contracting to understand exactly what the work was for.
Correct. And if you go back to the previous episode or two where we talk about project management, one of the project manager's jobs, primary jobs, is to review the timesheets submitted by the resources on the project, so they can actually say, that was right, or that was not right. And it all comes back to managing the budget of the project. And if the project manager sees these timesheets and says, hey, there's hours here, but you don't tell me what you're actually working on, it's the project manager's job to go back to whoever submitted that timesheet and say, hey, what are you doing? I don't see any task on here. How am I supposed to track that? So it shouldn't have even made it to accounts payable to even get coded and paid in the first place.
Thank you. My colleagues across the aisle talk continuously about the security of the application and the use of the application. But in section 1.74, you state that GC Strategies used 2 resources to check the cyber security of ArriveCan and did not ensure that these resources had the adequate security clearances, correct?
Yeah, we did find that individuals who did some of the security testing did not have the security clearances that were required by the contract. However, that security testing was done in a test environment. So it still raises a concern because a person could potentially be identifying vulnerabilities of the application, but they did not have access to individuals' data as it was in a test environment.
Are there many levels of this CBSA and PSPC that handle security checks to ensure the integrity and security of Canada's private information?
I mean, we didn't look at who issues security clearances here. What we were looking at was that a task authorization required that an individual doing work needed to have a certain level of security clearance, and we would have expected that the Canada Border Service Agency would have ensured that those carrying out the work had the requirements that have been outlined in the task authorization, and that's not what happened here.
So you literally have people that are contractors outside of the government without security clearance being given access to the infrastructure of an app like ArriveCan. Now, Karen can say, well, you know, there was no personal data in there because it was a test environment. That doesn't matter. They have access to the infrastructure. That's a big concern. Huge concern.
Why?
Because what if those same vulnerabilities actually made it into the production environment? These same resources would have knowledge of that.
Oh, you mean so like because they know what the problems are in the test environment, they can then go to another government system and hack it essentially?
Well, they could go to the same government system in the actual production environment and potentially hack it. Or sell the information on the dark web for it to be hacked. Like there's a lot of different pieces here. And this goes back to, well, you know, why would they do that? We don't know. That's why you get people cleared for security. That's why you do these in-depth background checks to ensure that the people that are working on this stuff should actually be working on this stuff, so they're actually cleared. And never mind that, when they're on the test environment and when they're even working on any of this stuff, they're going to be given documentation as to what the potential architecture is for these systems. So they'll know where all the servers are. They'll know where the networks are. They'll have access to all of that information.
So you could get some bad actors come in, pretend that they're, you know, IT guys working on this app, extract all that information, like as to where things are, how things work, and bring it back to whoever.
You sure could, because, you know, ArriveCan isn't just an app, right? It reaches back into the government, into all of these different databases to run these checks. So it's a serious concern.
How many points of failure occurred to allow this to happen? Would there be, in a process, would there be certain security checkpoints that you would audit in terms of following through a process? Would you be able to determine the number of points where this failed?
I think that's a difficult question. I guess it would start off with, was the security requirement checklist done before a task authorization or a contract was put forth? Once you set out the requirements in that task authorization, someone should have ensured that the resources that were proposed by the vendor met those requirements. And then you would have had to check a second time when the invoice came in that it was the actual individual. So there could be many points where this could have been flagged. But in this instance, I don't know the details as to, you know, where that failure might have occurred. But the fact remained that individuals who didn't have clearance carried out the work, and they shouldn't have.
Since GC Strategies had 2 examples of not properly vetting their resources and following the property security protocols, do you think that perhaps this should require further review, or perhaps their work across other departments, the $250 million, as we learned today, those security clearances, those who worked on these GC Strategies projects, should that perhaps be under further review after correlating the revelations that were found within your report and then the quantity of work completed by GC Strategies across government that we learned about today?
So just to make sure that that question is absolutely clear for everybody, Kuzi is basically saying, given what you've found in just ArriveCan and the shoddy work practices that GC Strategies has been practicing, do you think we should be taking a real close look at the other $190 million that we've been giving GC Strategies? And I think we all have the same answer to that question. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Report, we made it, a recommendation that all resources, including contractors and subcontractors, should have valid security clearances on the file prior to starting any work. And it's important that it's before they start work. Regardless of who the contractor is, and in this case, GC Strategies, that should be happening. So wherever this contractor is working, we would expect that that the departments or agencies are looking to make sure valid security clearances are in place before work is started.
I agree entirely with this recommendation, and further to the investigation of the RCMP, Bottler AI also made allegations that were reported in October of 2023 that stated they were not given the property security clearances before they began their work back in 2020. So do all of these examples bring concern of a systematic problem for you across government, or certainly across the agency, regarding security clearances?
I mean, it's hard to speak across the government since we really focused in here on ArriveCan, but it is a concern that if there's a requirement that an individual have a security clearance and that the person managing that contract didn't make sure that happened, that is a concern because there's valid reasons for having security clearances in place, and that's why we issued the recommendation. It does concern us.
All right. So that is basically at the most that the Auditor General is allowed to say. So what you can extract from that is she's very concerned that this is happening across the agency and maybe even across the government as a systemic wide fault of the public servants that are carrying out these contracting processes. That's what I extract from that.
Back to you, Auditor General. In light of the shocking revelations revealed today that GC Strategies has received $250 million under the Justin Trudeau government for a myriad of contracts, probably very similar in nature to the ArriveCan scandal, does that in and of itself heighten your suspicions with respect to GC Strategies? And if it does that heighten enough to notify the RCMP to expand their investigation to ArriveCan specifically?
I mean, as I said previously, I've spoken to the RCMP and we'll be happy to open our file should they issue a formal request and they can see the documentation and the evidence that we have around our audit.
Okay. And when you had those discussions with the RCMP, they never closed off that possibility. They didn't say to you, for instance, I'm sorry, Auditor General, we're not interested, anything like that?
No, I followed up the meeting with a letter on January 26th, and I have not heard from them since.
Thank you. Did ever an opportunity present itself where President O'Gorman confirmed with you any suspensions of any other CBS employees as a result of your findings?
We are not aware of any suspensions. We know that the two individuals who have been discussed at this committee previously have been suspended by their organizations, but we're not aware of any within CBSA. Thank
you. Were you aware as well that there's an allegation that Min Doan, the vice president of the CBSA, had deleted and or mysteriously had 4 years worth of emails corrupted? Were you aware of that fact?
Yes, we are aware of that.
Okay. And you'd agree with me, perhaps you, Mr. Hayes, with your legal background, that in and of itself could constitute an obstruction of justice?
When information is missing, there's always concerns about why. In the case of our audit, we were able to obtain information emails that Mr. Doan had sent to and from people that were relevant to our audit work. So
certainly not all 4 years worth.
We got a considerable amount of emails. Okay. We can't say that is completely comprehensive, right, because there are emails that would be deleted along the way.
Thank you. To Mr. Hanoush, is it correct that you interviewed Mr. McDonald and Mr. Utano literally within a few weeks of the release of the report?
Yes, we interviewed them in January.
Right. And when you interviewed both Mr. McDonald and Mr. Utano, was the report of the Auditor General substantially completed?
We were still in the process of completing the report.
Did any of the evidence that you received either orally or with documentation produced to you by both individuals, did that in any way factor in the ultimate report that you have shared with Canadians?
What was provided to us orally was confirmed with the two individuals when we interviewed them. And in terms of the materials provided, those were considered in the context of all of the other information we had in our files.
Were you also informed that Kelly Belanger of the CBSA was responsible for project management during the course of the ArriveCan creation?
I don't recall specifically that.
Were you informed by Mr. McDonald or Mr. Utano that she also was rewarded with a non-advertised promotion? No?
I'm not aware.
Okay. Did you interview the two partners at Bottler AI?
We did, yes.
You did? Yes. And did you ever receive either from Bottler or from President O'Gorman or anyone else from the CBSA for that matter, the full report regarding the misconduct that they alleged in the fall of 2022? Did you receive a copy of that?
Can we just clarify, are you talking about the internal
Bottler
investigation
complaint.
or the Bottler complaint?
The Bottler complaint.
The team did receive a copy of the Bottler
Okay.
complaint, yes.
And was it complete? It wasn't redacted in any way?
It was not redacted, no.
Okay. Besides the two individuals who are currently suspended without pay, McDonald and Utano, were there any other allegations of misconduct with any other CBS employee as contained in that report?
I would have to go back to the report at this point. We read that
Okay,
months ago.
would you share, can you go back to the report and share with this committee details of any other allegations of any other individual other than McDonald and Utano, please? Within 15 days?
I'm not sure if we're able to do that. That would be a request probably best made to the agency.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was a lot of crisscrossing that Brock did. So it seems that he was just trying to correlate and nail down a bunch of individual facts that he was circling around. But that point at the end, it sounds like he's looking, to expand the web now. They're done with McDonald and Utano. Now they're looking to expand who else was potentially in that. And there's one name that we know of that should be looked at here, and that's Ms. Diane Daly, because she's the one that Bottler alleged carried out the extortion request, meaning, give us all your documentation or we're going to shut down your contract. And that's exactly what happened. And Diane Daly would be the one potentially having the ability to hide where these costs were going when these invoices came in. And she's next on the list, I think. It would not surprise me at all if she was brought in, because she's that next piece in the trail when you're following this money. And the invoices were submitted, and it was really hard to actually trace this back to ArriveCan. We had to go through multiple GLs and all of this stuff. That's not McDonald, that's not Utano. It makes sense that that's going to be Ms. Diane Daly. So very interesting.
Just hang on right now, Mrs. Kusi. You have something for us,
Yes,
please?
I had a matter of hand motion, please.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, all right. I know we want to get to in camera here and get home for those of us who are so fortunate perhaps to have our Valentines here. I'm not one of them. But I have had 4 chocolates and a cupcake, so it's been a good day. Pardon me, Mr. Chair, I'll get serious again here. So we have seen now the evolution of the involvement of GC strategies and the implication of GC strategies, not only in the Bottler GC strategies investigation, but also their implication in ArriveCan. And it started out initially that we believed that they were involved in ArriveCan for $11 million. This is the number that we believed on all sides of the House, that my colleagues and I brought up many times within the House. And then we find out that it's actually $19 million, thanks to the good work of the Auditor General, which we're all, of course, very grateful for this report. And then we find out today that it actually could be more than the $19 million, given that the incomplete paperwork could result in a number that is greater than 19 million. And then we find out, Mr. Chair, due to reports within the media today, that GC Strategies has received since 2015 $250 million in contracts across this government. And I think that individuals on all sides of the House are incredibly concerned as to the processes which GC Strategies followed, and are certainly concerned to get to the bottom of how such a large amount of contracting was awarded to a firm which we have seen actually does none of the work, actually works as a headhunting firm, as my NDP colleague referred to. And I really think that this behooves a greater investigation and a greater evaluation by a body bigger than this committee. It's very hard to dispute that, given the increasing allegations which I've mentioned here today. And so I present, Mr. Chair, this following motion: that in light of new reports that GC Strategies has received $258 million since 2015 in government contracts, including 46 sole source contracts, the committee call on the Auditor General of Canada to conduct a performance audit on a priority basis of all payments to GC Strategies and its contracts with the Government of Canada, including all departments, agencies, and Crown corporations, including all subcontracts which GC Strategies has awarded under those contracts, and that the committee report these findings to the House. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we want to let all of that play out to just get the full story without interrupting that. And this is not a surprising motion to now come from the Conservatives, given the breadth of corruption that is being laid to bear by the Auditor General, given the amount of contracts that has been paid to GC Strategies, which our members would have seen, for a couple of months now that we reported on, which we've recently released to the public as a publicly facing video. Given all of this, the question has to be asked, okay, so you guys have been operating essentially under a fraudulent approach with the Government of Canada. Seems like you've been working in cahoots with people inside of the federal government and the public service. So the question has to be asked, what else is there? What else of that $250 million in contracts, which probably equates to around $75 million in pocket for these guys, 30%, remember? What else is there? How many other contracts have they been operating on a fraudulent basis for? Is it all of them? Is it some of them? What is it?
How deep does this rabbit hole go?
And then the question comes to play, how do we get our money back?
And that's what I want to know. Like, it's not as important for me if these guys go to jail. What's most important for me is how are Canadians going to get our tax dollars back? Are they going to take these guys to court? Can they seize assets? I have no idea.
Or is that money gone? Right? This is what the justice system has to figure out. So it's a foregone conclusion that Christian Firth, by his own idiocy, has admitted to doctoring resumes in committee. So that's public record. It's on video. Good luck with that, Christian. And now there's evidence that there was collusion going on between GC Strategies, aka Christian Firth, and the CBSA. So, there's multiple charges here. that's going on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And on this side of the House, we also want to get down to the bottom of these issues and these items. And I'd like to propose an amendment. And it would be as follows, if I may, that in light of the new reports by GC Strat.
Sorry, can I interrupt? Do you have it written down?
I do have it written down, and I can share it.
Yeah, if you want, share it with the clerk while you're reading it.
Yeah, can someone?
Sorry, as soon as you finish reading. Sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Smith.
And so it's in keeping with the proposal, and it would read as follows: that in light of the new reports that GC Strategies has received millions of dollars in government contracts, including a number of sole source contracts. So I'm removing the 258, and I'm removing since 2005, or removing the number of 46. It could be a number of them. That the committee request the Auditor General of Canada to conduct a performance audit on a priority basis of all payments to GC Strategies, including and specifically with Christian Firth and or his business partner Darren Anthony before the founding of GC Strategies, and all contracts with Government of Canada, including all departments, agencies, and Crown corporations, including all subcontracts with GC Strategies, and the before mentioned have been awarded under those contracts. And then I remove the rest of it. So I'm saying go after all of it.
So in a surprising amendment from Charles Sousa, he has essentially amended the motion that Kuzi had put forward. So Kuzi had put forward the amendment saying, give us everything since 2015 to GC Strategies. What Sousa is saying is have her look into everything since 2015 from GC Strategies and everything before that, which would go all the way back to at least 2009 when Christian Firth joined Veritac. So that's what he has put forward in a surprising amendment. So the one thing that just popped into my head: why would it be advantageous to the Liberals to expand the scope of this?
Because now it looks like they're on side instead of fighting against it and trying to cover something up.
In addition to the fact that it will lengthen the time that this actually takes to come back. Right? Because if the scope is only 2015, that's going to take a certain amount of time. But if you're now including any and all contracts, that's going to increase the scope, thereby increasing the amount of time that it's going to take the Auditor General to come back, which could be beyond the next scheduled election. So it may be an attempt for the Liberals to actually punt this down the road. That's a possibility here. That might be a motivation as to why they're asking to expand the scope of this. It would be in their interest for this to take as long as possible. Because if this takes beyond the next election, if the election does happen to go to the fall of 2015, which it has no chance of doing, they have nothing to worry about in terms of at least the next Auditor General report, right? So that's a possibility here.
I would like to put forward a sub-amendment. There you go. Are we back on track?
Yes.
Yeah?
We are.
Good. And it reads as the following. Just add the following sentence to the end of that amendment, which would read, and that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee request a government response.
Yes, Chair. The effect of this request, as my colleagues know, is that it delays the possibility of the response time requirement is 120 days, right? So we're in the middle of February. This means that effectively there could be no decision of the House on this matter until, taking into consideration timelines and so forth, probably until into the summer and then into the fall session. So I think notionally the idea of asking the government to provide their feedback on this is welcome, but the reference to Standing Order 109 is a sneaky attempt by the government to effectively prevent the House from pronouncing itself on this matter until the fall. And so I hope that the committee will join me in seeing through the continuing shady efforts of the government to bury this issue by stealth, and will not support this sub-amendment.
Many hours later.
So we haven't showed you all of the boring stuff.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome. But what has been going on behind the scenes is that the Liberals have, they tried to introduce an amendment to this whole thing that would require the government to provide a response prior to the House voting on the Auditor General from continuing the audit. And they referenced a government procedure that would potentially delay the response for up to 120 days. That's 4 months.
That means that we're into the fall session because Parliament usually shuts down mid-June.
Right. So then, assuming that it passed, what would then happen is that the House would then vote, no doubt, to have the Attorney General continue her audit, which would then definitely put it past, whatever election, could come. But this 120-day timeline could also put it past any potential spring election. Now, the interesting thing here is when they voted on it, both the NDP and the Bloc voted against it. So the Bloc and the NDP joined the Conservatives in voting against this.
Well, and the Bloc often do join the Conservatives in voting for or against motions in committee, I've noticed. But the significant one here is the NDP. They're not supporting the Liberals, at least not in this motion. I think that's quite significant.
And because it came to a tie, the tie vote then goes to the chair, who is Kelly
conservative.
McCauley. Yes, he's a conservative, so he, of course, voted against it. So it was voted down.
Many unbearable hours later.
So the resulting motion that ended up passing, which the Liberals had to agree with because the Bloc and the NDP signaled that they were not going to be on side with them trying to bury the investigation any further, was that this is going to the House and this is at some point going to be voted on by the House on whether or not to have the Auditor General continue the investigation into the full history of GC Strategies as well as Christian Firth and Darren Anthony. So, as Fox said, this is significant because the Liberals just got a signal that the NDP and the Bloc are not buying into this delaying and obfuscating of the investigation any longer.
Yeah, they're not on side anymore because it would be worse for both of those parties to side with the Liberals than it would for them to go against the Liberals.
Especially with the news reports that $250 million worth of taxpayer contracts have been funneled through GC Strategy since 2015. This is just one more hit to Trudeau, and there's 2 or 3 more scandals that ended up coming through the media today. So the hits just keep on coming for the Liberals, and you're not going to see the Bloc and the NDP trying to get in front of that bus that is on his way to bowling over this Liberal government.
Exactly. What is in it for them? They've got nowhere to go but down in the polls if the Bloc or the NDP decide to stick up for the Liberals or side with the Liberals, especially on this issue. Canadians are pissed about this. I mean, with the SNC-Lavalin affair, that was a big deal, but most Canadians didn't know about it. I didn't even know about it until we started researching it for Northern Perspective. And it happened back in 2016. This is right in Canadians' faces, and we're all upset because this is our tax money that's been wasted at a time when many of us are struggling.
So it's time to get to the bottom of this. And this time it looks like the Trudeau government can't do anything to stop it.